Hey guys, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming Studios. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I've got some terrain set up on the board here. I've got some models to my right here. And we're going to go through a little bit of a tactics video. Today we're going to be showing you how to use movement or mobility to win in 9th edition as the Tyranids. I personally believe that the movement phase or just mobility in general is a key part of 9th edition, but it is also something the Tyranids do really well. They may not be the most durable army, they may not bring the biggest punch, but what they do bring is mobility that few armies can match. And in this video, we're going to show you some tips, some tricks, and some tactics on how to use this mobility to better your games in 9th edition. If you like this sort of video, please like and subscribe. It helps out a small channel like us, and comment if you like these videos, what other sorts of tactics would you like to see in the future? With that being said, let's get into the video. All right. So I've got a little bit of a setup here kind of to show you. We've got some objective placed, 1, 2, and if pan over, there's a 4th objective. This is taken out of Scorched Earth, mission number 5 of the Eternal War section in the Warhammer 40k rulebook. But we're going to go through a little bit of the phases and how you can use mobility in each of the phases in order to get you farther in the game. So this first trick is one of the Tyranids' best stratagems. I'll show it here, or it'll pop up on your screen. And this is Metabolic Overdrive for 1 command point. So this essentially, it allows us Tyranids to double move in the movement phase, including advancing. So one thing to note is when you do double move, you have to keep the same die. So I've got a group of Hormagaunts set up, and let's say I want to use Metabolic Overdrive to slingshot them forward. What we're going to do is we roll our advanced die, and you get a 6. Now we do not roll a second die for our second advance. We keep the same number that we have on this first die. So in this case, they got a move of 8 plus 6 is 14, and we do that twice. So that is a whopping 28-inch movement. Now I'm just going to show you where, now this was best case scenario, but we'll go all the way over here. You guys can just see where that puts our Hormagaunts here. So that's now there's a downside to the stratagem, is we do have to roll a die for every Gaunt or every model that uses this. So here, you know, we need one more die. 5 dice, on a roll of a 1, they die. So in this case, 2 of them would have died, but, you know, that's what we get for rolling like that, or for rolling a 6 here. So that's one case you can use Metabolic Overdrive, or that is, I should say, that is what Metabolic Overdrive is. So some of the best ways to use Metabolic Overdrive is to score primary objectives and secondary objectives, ones like Line Breaker, Engage in All Fronts, and Deploy Scramblers. These are great ones to do it. So I'll show you another trick here with Metabolic Overdrive. This one, I mean, this is great. If you have a group of Gaunts just hiding in a corner, and, you know, if you're going second, you score at the end of your turn. So this will allow you to have that potential to get into the corner of a map somewhere, you know, somewhere you can never really think about getting, or your opponent might think about you getting. But Engage in All Fronts is another good stratagem the Tyranids can use. And that is, or stratagem, sorry, another great secondary the Tyranids can pick. And that's for having a unit in each of the table quarters, or at least 3. So here's my center line right here. Now, so I would need to have my Hormagaunt unit wholly within is key. They cannot be crossed over like this. That would not be wholly within. They are along that center line. They need to be all the way on this side to count for this quadrant. which, you know, Hormagaunts have a 8 move, but if you need to guarantee those points, then you can really shoot your Gaunts up with Metabolic Overdrive. Another trick I like to do, and that is to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And I'll show you guys here. I've set up here. This is a typical deployment I like to do if I'm bringing 2 or 3 lictors. I'll put one here, out of line of sight of my opponent, and I will have it within an 18-inch range of a center objective. Not only that, but if possible, so it can be on the other side of engage in all fronts. So what I do with that in my games is the best time to normally use lictors is deep striking. But for deploy scramblers, sometimes with deploy scramblers, it's often that middle deploy scramblers, at least for Tyranids, is the hardest one to do. Your later turns, you can deep strike a lictor into your opponent's corners and get your deploy scrambler tick. Turn 1, you often think, okay, I can do it in my phase or my table quarter to start, and that's it. Easy. But think ahead. You want to get ahead. It might be hard to do that middle one in turn 2 or 3, especially if your opponent has an aggressive army. So I will take my lictor and deploy him in such a way that he is 18 inches away from the opponent's deployment quarter, just like this. So now what I can do is, if I go first or second, if I go first, great. If I go second, then he hides. But what I like to do is I will use Metabolic Overdrive. If I take the 1 wound, who cares? It's a 37-point model. And I will move him 18 inches all the way up here onto that objective. Now, if you could get him, say, in the building and still be on that objective or in some sort of line of sight blocking, that's great. That'll keep him alive, but him surviving beyond this turn is not the most important thing. Because he's only 37-point model, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 of them in the list. I think you should, especially in competitive play. You should have at least 2. But so he moves up here. Not only does this lictor now have the objective for primary purposes, you can also make him do your first deploy scramblers. Therefore, you've done the hardest one already off the bat. You don't have to worry about that one ever again. The other thing with this is you also have the rest of your army to consider. With this, you'll probably want to move. What I do is this lictor that is basically suiciding and gaining you a ton of points up here, I would put this lictor on the weaker flank of your army. And the reason I say that is because your stronger flank of your army is already going to be marching up the board. Let's say we'll bring back my my Termagant boys here. Let's pan out here. If I have my Termagants or Hormagaunts here, sorry, if they're set up on the edge of the deployment, and I'm going to be rushing them forward, say, you know, probably advancing them on your first turn. Well, gosh, if they advance, they get a 3, they're moving 11, they're already rushing up the board. Now, if they get a high enough advance, then they could potentially get across that line. But what is the point in having my Lictor and Hormagaunts doing that on the same quarter? You want them to be spread out, that way you can get maximum points for engaging all fronts. So put your Lictor on your weaker flank, let him get them, let him take that objective, and force your opponent to get off of it. The next stage to this is we're going to look at a Kraken specific one, and that is opportunistic advance. Let's see if we can get a focus in here. Very much like Metabolic Overdrive, except it's a Kraken special, so it's a little bit better. What this one does, it allows you to double your advance roll for your total move characteristic rather than advancing as normal. So, you know, you also don't have to take the penalties, the rolling the dice to see if you die. So this is also a great one. It works really well with Gene Stealers. So let's say you got your Gene Stealers hiding back behind this building because you've deployed in a smart way and tucked your Gene Stealers away just in case you end up going second. Well, if you do go second, then great. You can use this opportunistic advance and you can double the advance roll. Now because you're Kraken, you have 3 dice. So you roll them, you're like, ooh, I like that 6. Now that 6 becomes a 12 and you add the 8 inches on top of it. So now you're getting 20 inches to move these Gene Stealers. We'll put them right where that middle guy is. So now this squad of Gene Stealers has the ability to be already up in these guys' face. Let's say they have a chaplain back here and he's giving them some support. Well, now you, because you rolled such a good roll, you can actually swing your models all the way around up to here and get that close one right into here, and you only need a 4-inch charge. In this case, I would multi-charge every time you roll your dice. Wow, we failed that. Command point reroll. Look at that, there we go. Sometimes dice happen. And now you can bring the majority of your models into here and tag some here and have all of the free reign at snagging that character they didn't think you had the ability to go after. So that's opportunistic advance. A lot of the same things you can do with metabolic overdrive. Let's look at one more thing that happens in the movement phase, specifically with Kraken, and that is the ability to fall back and still charge. This is a one way you can use this to be very, very effective with your Tyranids. So you got your Hormagaunts here. They make an amazing charge, and we're going to use our Imperial Guard here as some test models for our opponents. Let's say your Hormagaunts get a nice healthy charge, and that will allow you to surround this Chimera here. Your goal, and to think about this a lot when you're using Gaunts and Gene Stealers and even sometimes Carnifexes, your goal when charging certain units, especially transports, is not to kill them, but to trap them. There are a few ways you can do this. So let me show you. So I've set these Gaunts up in a way, pull the camera over here, get the shadow out of the way. You can see that there's no way for this model to physically move out of combat from the Hormagaunts. There's a stratagem that everyone has access to, and that would allow them to pull this transport out of combat even though you're moving through models. But if they aren't willing to do that, because it is a hefty 2 command point stratagem, and maybe you have multiple vehicles tied up, so you've got this Chimera tied up. Now, they don't kill it, you don't kill it, it's kind of a stalemate here. They can't get their guys out because you're surrounded it. But it's your turn. There is an objective here, objective number 4, held by a command squad, or whatever it is. Now these Gaunts have got one goal. They don't care about this objective anymore. Hopefully you have something else that can deal with it. They care about that deeper objective, because if your opponent's doing something like raise the banners, those back objectives are probably pretty important. So what you're going to do now is fall back, but you're going to fall back towards the enemy, because despite the name falling back, you actually can fall or retreat in any direction you see fit, as long as you maintain your 2-inch coherency throughout your unit. Or, yeah, 2-inch coherency around your unit. So now you've fallen back, but you can still charge. So it comes a charge phase, and now you roll your charge, and you can move in, and you can take this objective because you are objective secured, and a command squad is not. Now this objective is yours, and maybe you've got something like a Hive Tyrant who's ready to come up and deal with this vehicle, or you've got some other troops to deal with that. If you can do this to 2 vehicles at one time, that would be huge, because now they can only do it to 1, so you're bound to get this strategy to work off in one case. All right, a little bit on the psychic phase. There are 2 key movement stratagems to use, and there's not a whole lot of tactics to show with them, so I'm just going to talk through them here quickly. You guys might see some pop-ups on your screen, but basically the 2 powers we have, again, Kraken, we know they're key for mobility. Their power specific is Synaptic Lure, which allows you to pick an enemy unit and you can reroll charges. This will pair well with fallback and charge. Because there's no range on the power, I could have my Hive Tyrant, for whatever reason, he's chilling back here, up on this building. And he could have chose this command squad to be the unit that people can reroll charges against. So that Gaunt squad now can reroll their charge after falling back from the Chimera, and then have an even more consistent time of piling in there. So there's that one. The last one, I touched on it a little bit, but Onslaught, allow a unit to advance and charge, or advance and shoot, which is always great if you've got, you know, some Termagants or some Carnifexes that want to keep up that mobility while still putting in some firepower. Great. You do take the -1 to hit if you advance and shoot, but you know, that's totally fine on a lot of units. But the part you'll probably use this more for is allowing a unit to advance and charge that already couldn't. Some key units to think about this on: we have Hormagaunts, we have the Hive Tyrant, and really any other big bugs. So Trigons, Swarmlord himself, other, you know, Hive Tyrants, Harusvex, Toxicrins, any of those big boys where advancing and charging isn't as common like it is on the Gene Stealers. Oh, those aren't Gene Stealers. As it is on the Gene Stealers. It's good. The only trick is it's a little bit of a gamble if you don't have the Swarmlord. And we'll get into that right now, because this leads us right into talking about the next thing. That's a shooting phase. If you bring the Swarmlord, we essentially have a mini movement phase in the shooting phase, which we can take advantage of. There are 2 methods to using the Swarmlord. That is the slingshot, and those are tactical movements. We're here in the shooting phase and use Hive Commander, and these guys get to go again. And you know, they move their 8 inches up the board, and now they're already deeper towards enemy lines, and they still get to advance. Because the ruling on Hive Commander is move as if it were the movement phase. So now back to where we were with Onslaught. So Gene Stealers, they can already advance and charge. But what about your wonderful Hormagaunts? These guys, they couldn't advance and charge, but now if you don't have Swarmlord, you're gambling in your movement phase, where if you advance with them and you don't get Onslaught off, well, shoot, what are you going to do? Now they're kind of stuck, not able to charge. If that happens, send them off towards an objective or something. At least make sure they get some sort of use instead of just sitting in the open or sitting up the board. You could use them to move block, okay? You know, you did get Onslaught off, but that doesn't mean you can't advance again. Advance again and move them up and just create a big line right in front of your opponent. Doing that with a bunch of Gaunts is actually a really good strategy, because now what you're doing is, let's say I've got this tank right here. You can't shoot before your movement phase, so this tank cannot interact with these models at all. So if he wants to move, instead of, you know, he wants to get towards that objective over here, well, now he can't. Now he has to go, you know, around it, and maybe he doesn't have the range. Think about doing that on a group of, say, 20 Gaunts or 30 Gaunts. If you can create a nice Congo line while still maintaining coherency, you are essentially canceling out your opponent's first movement phase, or upcoming movement phase, by being able to do some sort of tactical move like this. And that's a backup in case your Onslaught doesn't go off. If you want to be a little more safe, you could not advance in your movement phase, see if you get the power off, And if you do, then advance in your shooting phase with Hive Commander. Then you're guaranteed one move, a second move, and advance, and a charge. If not, then you can just move again, and maybe you have to make a slightly longer charge. Those are your options. So those are sort of the slingshot moves, and how to go about them. Another thing is a tactical move you can do with, say, Zoanthropes. Your Zoanthropes are sitting back here, and they're floating, and they're ready, and they want to get off a smite. Well, now their smite, yes, is 24 inches, so maybe they have range there if they don't move. But what if they want to get another power off, like Psychic Scream, so they can basically be doing 2 smites in one turn? Now, granted, you can only do that if there are 4 Zoanthropes in the squad. So, you know what, actually, let's get a 4th one. For illustration purposes, let's grab another Zoanthrope. We've got 4 Zoanthropes here now. So now they know Psychic Scream and Smite. And you've got Swarmy here too. What you could do is advance, and if you're Kraken, you get 3 dice. Advance with your Zoanthropes. 3 inches, not the best, but it's fine. You have fly, so you move these boys all the way up. And you get them nice in range, but you take one of them and hang them back within 6 inches of Zoanthropes, or of the, Zoanthropes, of the Swarm Lord. Now, if you look, you're in 18-inch range of the Eradicators, and if you position yourself properly, let's say, you had some distance and you could go like this. You're still coherent with the Zoanthropes, but this lone Zoanthrope in the front is closest to the Eradicator, and he can cast some smite. Now, that would be great, get some, cast a smite. Ooh, okay, let's say you got a Neurothrope. Cast a smite, goes off, you do some mortal wounds. Great, you get D3 plus D3, 6 mortal wounds. You go for a Psychic Scream, bam, goes off. All right, so you just did 8 mortal wounds to those Eradicators. They are hurting right now. You've killed 2, almost 3 of them. We'll fan them down here. And you have 1 wound on it. But now, you are in threat range of these Assault Intercessors. They're going to move up, and they are looking at a somewhat juicy charge here on your Zoanthrope. Sure, it's a 7, 8-inch charge. Still, you don't want your Zoanthropes in combat with them. So what you do in your shooting phase, you take Swarm Lord, Hive Commander, and now you can move all these boys back, even advance them if you want. And they are out of threat range because that 7 or 8-inch charge now turns into them needing a boxcars, which is great because the Zoanthrope's weakness is being charged, being tied up. You can use Hive Commander to really move your Zoanthropes around the board, allowing to pinpoint key targets and falling back. So that's Hive Commander. Probably one of the best abilities that the Tyranids have access to. And you want to make sure if you're bringing Swarmy that you use that to its fullest potential every turn that Swarm Lord is alive. There are some things you can't do. We should go over those very quickly. Since 9th edition came out, you cannot bring a unit or move a unit with Swarm Lord that has just arrived this turn. So let's say, for whatever reason, you deep struck a Flying Hive Tyrant. You cannot use Hive Commander on this Hive Tyrant to let him move 16 inches after he drops in. While that would be awesome, and it used to be great when you could do that for the time. I love doing it on Trigons that came up from reserve, moving them, or Raveners. Can't do that anymore. Likewise, if you have a group of Gaunts that hop on the board over here from Strategic Reserve, they hop in on the corner, you cannot have them move with Hive Commander. It is a rule that explicitly says they cannot move, or units that arrive from reserve cannot move for whatever reason except a charge roll for their turn they arrived. Just something to remember. It's easy because our codex is kind of behind. It's easy to forget that that's a rule, but just keep that one in mind. Now we're moving on to the charge phase, and we're going to feature our Hive Tyrant here with the Heavy Venom Cannon, but any Synapse creature with shooting capabilities will do for this. We're going to look at 2 stratagems that were given to us in Blood of Baal that are very wordy and somewhat niche, but if you can use them to your advantage, they are great utility stratagems. So these 2 that I'm talking about are Hunter's Drive and Hive's Instinct. We'll start with Hunter's Drive first. So it states, if you charge an enemy unit that is within 6 inches of a Synapse creature, and that enemy unit lost a model due to the shooting of a Synapse creature that you are within 6 inches of, the unit will gain an extra d6 that you can then discard the lowest of 3 on their charge. In simpler terms, my Heavy Venom Cannon here slays one of these models, one of these Assault Intercessors. Now my Hormagaunts want to charge the Assault Intercessors. Because they're within 6 inches of the Hive Tyrant that killed an Assault Intercessor in the shooting phase, they now get 3d6, take the 2 highest for the charge. So there, I turned a potential 7 or 8 inch charge into an 11 inch charge. It's great if you can plan around it. It just helps guarantee some of those key charges, because there are a lot of times, especially for Tyranids with their mobility, that getting a charge off can be game changing, especially if it's on an objective or something. This is one of those stratagems. The contrast is we have Hive's Instinct, which goes as follows. So let's say I've got my Hive Tyrant up here. He makes a big bad charge into these guys. And now the Hormagaunts are feeling a little bit left out. As long as the Hormagaunts declare the Assault Intercessors or any unit that is within an inch of a Synapse creature, then they get 3d6 and take the highest. So let's say I want to go in, 3d6, bam, I have a 10 inch charge. You can still do this with multi-charging. So let's say I want to charge these Blade Guard Veterans and the Assault Intercessors. Maybe the Blade Guard Veterans are a little bit farther back and that charge just doesn't seem as likely. Well, if you're feeling like it, you can use this. You get 3d6. Look at that, 10 inch charge. You probably wouldn't have made it if you didn't have that. So now you can charge these guys, and all you need is to have one model and within engagement range of that unit. And bam, you're in. Again, it's very situational. It might not happen in any games, and you might have games where this is key. Something for you guys to think about when you're using your Gaunts, especially your Hormagaunts and your Gene Stealers. Any way to get an extra charge in there is great. Also to note, if you take your 3d6 and you roll, so far we're doing pretty good rolls, but let's say we roll a 1, 2, 3. Rules of command point rerolls, you get to reroll the whole lot of 3 dice and go for it again. There, you turned a 5 inch charge into an 8 inch charge. Again, just something to think about. All right, we've got one more stratagem to look at, and that is what I would argue is probably the best stratagem in the Tyranid Codex right now, if not top 3, and that is Overrun. So what this says, when you go to consolidate a Tyranid unit in your army, in this case, we have our lovely Flying Hive Tyrant here, and there are no enemy models within 3 inches, so let's say he cuts down all these guys, he can take a movement phase, essentially. What you can do with this, so we've got it set up here. We've got our big, mean, nasty group of Eradicators here, and they are hungry for some death of our Hive Tyrant. Well, our Hive Tyrant came in here. he's in combat with these 5 assault intercessors, and he slices them down. No problem. Well, now, we don't want to be shot by these eradicators. Instead, we'll use 1 command point for Overrun, and we will advance, always advance on top of this. It won't hurt you. Roll your advance, a 2. Okay, Hive Tyrant, let's say he's sitting at his top move bracket, 18. We're going to do this. You see we've got some line of sight blocking terrain. We're going to move 18 inches, like this. And now our Hive Tyrant cannot be seen from the angle of these eradicators, and he is safe from the following shooting phase. Absolutely brilliant when it comes to keeping some of your big monsters alive. It doesn't work as well on things like Hormagaunts and Gene Stealers because it's harder to hide, say, those units. With a flying Hive Tyrant, it's a good way to keep them alive a long time. You can also use Overrun to, say, get on objectives. So, somehow, let's say, for an example, these Hormagaunts killed these Blade Guard veterans. I don't know how they did it, but let's say they did it. You don't want to consolidate towards, say, this tank. No, you want the objective, but you want this objective. Maybe this one's extra important. So instead of consolidating, use Overrun, and now you can huddle back to this objective. Maybe you've got Venomthropes or a Malanthrope within range of this, so now they're sitting in a -1 bubble. It is a great way to just keep your opponent on their back foot with how much mobility you have. So we talked about moving Flyrants and other models to cover. We talked about getting them on objective. We've already touched on move blocking, but we'll say it one more time just to clarify for you guys, or just to kind of hammer this in. Let's say these guys, again, they killed the Blade Guard. We don't know how, but they did it. You can take a movement phase, right? So you advance, and now you move block an enemy unit again. You can get up there and just create an absolute line. So now their units that want to move towards you, they can't do it. Their movement phase for the next turn is shut down. Those gaunts will get murdered, but it'll allow you one more turn of controlling the majority of the field. So we touched on move blocking. There is one last piece to Overrun that has been showing up huge in tournaments lately. And we're going to give you a little showcase of how this works. So everyone knows the big Editon model, our flying Bio-Titan. I don't have one, so we're going to use a Valkyrie for our example. Overrun states that you can move as if it were the movement phase. Well, let's say your Editon comes in here and he absolutely butchers these 5 assault intercessors. And you don't want him to get shot by our angry eradicators in the corner. Well, lucky for you, the Editon is a flyer. And the flyer has, an aircraft specifically. The aircraft has a key rule, and I will read it out of page 257 for you guys in the Warhammer 40k 9th edition core rulebook. And this says, the second paragraph, if you have a battle-forged army, aircraft units from your army can, in your movement phase, for Overrun, move as if it were the movement phase, move off the edge of the battlefield, assuming it has sufficient move for any part of its base or hull to touch the edge of the battlefield. If an aircraft does so, place it in strategic reserves. You can deep strike it the following turn. So, essentially how this works, I don't expect this to last any longer than it does, because I feel like it's something they could, write in the FAQ. Can't use this with the Editon to fly off the table. But this Editon, not necessarily the most durable thing, but still really good. It will die to a ton of Meltas and heavy firepower. Kills these assault intercessors. Well, look at that. There's no any models within 3 inches. Pay 1 command point for Overrun. Goodbye. Off the table. He's gone. Your Eradicators, they're so sad. They have nothing to shoot but gaunts. And then in your next turn, movement phase, deep strike the Harridan back in. He's got to remain, I believe, 9 inches away from everybody as usual. But now he can blast up, you know, these Eradicators. Maybe he brings 1 down to 1 wound. If you can get a lucky charge on him, charge, kill the last Eradicator, pay 1 command point for Overrun, and fly off the board. It is absolutely broken. But if you own a Harridan, try it out, because you might just have the most unkillable and most expensive model in the game. So this has been our video on how to use mobility to better yourself in your games of Warhammer 40k 9th edition. Mobility is a key part for the Tyranids and a key part for 9th edition. So combining the two really will help you take your game to the next level. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. It really helps out a channel like us. And if you thought this sort of hodgepodge, you know, different view sort of video was good, where you got to see the models and some tactics, you know, a little bit of a sit down, then let us know. Let us know if you have other ideas for videos like this. We'd love to try them out. We're always looking for some more ideas on things to do for you guys. With that being said, thanks for watching.